how I process ordinary backyard dirt into the kind of clay that can be used to make anything out of pottery. Now that I have the clay ready, it's time to actually make something out of it, and the very first thing I want to make is a crucible for casting projects. In yesterday's video, I talked about two different approaches to problems. One that starts with what you want and works from there to find out what you need for that, and another approach that starts with what you have and works from there to find out the possibilities inherent in what it is that you have on hand. Now, for a crucible, I could just start with the end in mind. I could just buy a crucible on Amazon, have it appear on my doorstep in 2 days, and go from there. That said, in this case, with the crucible, I want to use the other process. I want to start with what I have, clay, and see how far I can get with it. So I'm going to try to make my own crucible. Before I show you the process I used, I want to talk a little bit about crucible theory and what makes a good crucible. Crucibles, of course, are vessels that hold molten metal as part of the casting process. So most basically, you need a vessel that can withstand large temperature fluctuations of the kind that you'll encounter in a furnace. However, within that specification, there's a huge amount of potential variety. Now, most crucibles I see that are being sold are graphite clay crucibles, and that is a pretty common material, but you can actually make crucibles out of quite a few different clays and other minerals, and in fact, you can even make a crucible out of metal, as long as the metal that you're using for the crucible has a higher melting point than the metal that you're casting. Beyond the material that you're using to make the crucible, there can be a lot of other factors that play into what makes a good crucible. There's the specific metal you're casting, there's the fluxes that you're using, there's the way that you've set up your furnace to pour things and to heat things up. Here I'm just aiming for a really basic crucible that is also hopefully good. I'm going to use the clay I have, I'm going to make a large cup with a kind of pour spout, and I'm going to hope for the best. I'm actually going to make 3 crucibles, and one of the reasons for this is because I want to test different materials for each crucible. Now, the base material for all 3 crucibles is going to be clay, but I'm going to have different additives in each of these 3 crucibles. In one of them, I'm adding sand at a 1:3 ratio, 1 part sand to 3 parts clay by weight. In another, I'm adding sand in a 1:6 ratio by weight. And in the third, I'm taking about 3 pounds of clay and adding about 16 ounces of dry grass clippings. And all these measurements are pretty approximate, by the way. Now, the reason I'm adding the sand and grass clippings is actually to provide some more structural integrity for the crucible. If you've been watching our smelt videos, you know that we add grass or other fibrous plant matter to the mud mix while we're building the furnaces, and that's basically what I'm doing here by adding grass clippings to the clay. Basically, the grass acts like rebar in concrete, which is actually pretty cool. In the case of the sand, I'm adding what is called grog, and grog is a semi-technical term in pottery that means a sand-like material that you mix in with the clay, and it helps stiffen the clay, it gives it support, and it also reduces cracking while it dries. It acts kind of like a skeleton for the clay to hang around. And in this case, obviously, I'm using sand. Another really common choice for grog is actually old ground-up fired pottery shards. I'm hoping that the sand that I'm using here, and this is just ordinary sandbox sand, by the way, I'm hoping it's high in silica and alumina. And the reason for that is that not only would that make good grog, but these are also common additives in crucibles more generally. So fingers crossed for that. Okay, so here are my finished crucibles. They are not very pretty, to say the least, but hopefully they'll work. The next step is going to be to dry them out totally, at least for a week, and then I'm going to try to fire them and glaze them. So check back soon if you want to see how this experiment with crucibles turns out. Also, if you do have comments about the process, or if you have ideas about projects related to casting, or I guess really anything else, I'd certainly love to hear about them in the comments below. Thanks as always for watching. We'll see you next time.
Làm lụm cả đời, không bằng tiền lời của đô la.